Well, Anna, thank you very much for that introduction. Certainly, I have to tell you, it's certainly undeserved, but I appreciate the generosity and kindness. And first of all, I want to thank Ali and the hardworking committee that he has that are putting on these workshops and bringing together, people all over the world to talk about things that maybe there's no other way that we'd be talking about. And it's awesome. I just the only word I can think of at the moment. It's just awesome to be in this conversation, a sacred conversation, by the way, that for most people walk through their lives with quiet desperation. They hide, they conceal, they put up a social mask, and yet they're suffering. Here in Alcoholics Anonymous, we have plenty of opportunity to open up. Just for a moment, I can reflect on Jimmy's beautiful, humble, and wonderful, inspiring talk, articulating exactly my experience about my life. Jimmy, I just want to thank you so much for delivering such a powerful talk. And Paulie, my goodness, I admire you so much because you have the confidence and the courage to be real, to be humble, to be open to change. It certainly inspired me. You taught me once again how important it is to keep growing. And I thank you for that gift, Paulie. It's wonderful. And I'm anxious to hear the rest of the speakers. I'm anxious to hear.
I
was anxious to hear what everybody's going to be talking about, because we're talking about something very unique. We share a disease, yes, we do, but we also share a language. It's often called the language of the heart. Language of the heart. So let me just back up a moment. I am an alcoholic. I'm a drunk. I belong to a group called the Agape Group, which is a Greek word for unconditional love. And what I've learned over my recovery, it is in the love in which I can have recovery. It's nowhere else. That I had to somehow reconcile the separation that Jimmy spoke so clearly about between myself and God and from other people. Somehow or another, I had to experience and begin to understand what belonging actually means in this life. And of course, when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, I had no language to talk about this. All I knew that I was desperate. I was full of shame and anger and upset, frustrated. I had no working plans. I couldn't move ahead because of the confusion that surrounded me everywhere. So in Agape, in my group, as I say, means unconditional love. It's the love that God has for me and for you, for us, that we share that love. But somehow or another, in the disease that I have, blocked the sunlight. It was the defects of character, the way I thought, the way I felt, the self-centeredness in which I filtered everything in my life was blocking that sunlight. And I didn't know how to remove it. I didn't even know I had it. So coming to Alcoholics Anonymous was first of all, I came here because I thought if I quit drinking, all my problems would just go away. Drinking was my problem. And of course, we learned very quickly through the wisdom of the big book, through the sharing of people, that alcohol isn't the problem. It's a symptom of the problem. And really what was longing in my heart, which I couldn't identify, nor could I give language to, was this deep desire to be connected to my God. So in I walked to Alcoholics Anonymous, confused, uncertain, but I have to say, I was prepared to defend myself because those old ideas were my ideas, and I trusted those ideas even though the outcome of those ideas were disastrous. So I defended myself. That is insanity. So what happens? You know, something mystical happened to me. The first meeting I ever went to, that was, I saw hope. No one told me to hope. I saw it. I experienced it. I was observing people around me and thinking, my God, they could stay sober, and perhaps so can I. This is in the first meeting. Being touched by the grace of God, even though I didn't know that I was being touched. And there it started. Now, I've been sober since December 23rd, 1972. This is my 50th year of sobriety. And if that sure impresses the hell out of me, I'll tell you. Because I came here with this learned helplessness that I couldn't stay sober for any period of time. I quit drinking thousands of times, and yet I could never stay stopped. So for me to imagine I could stay sober a week or 2 weeks, a month, or even a year, my God, I couldn't even think about that, because I had proven to myself over and over again. I had convincers that I couldn't do this on my own. So I walked in this conversation. I like to think that Alcoholics Anonymous is a conversation, a sacred conversation. And all of a sudden, I allowed things to happen an inch at a time. I didn't jump in. I didn't abandon myself completely. Inch at a time. It's a game of inches for me. Slowly, I began to let go. And like the earlier speaker said, when I came in, the big book was something to hide something in. If you know, because it was rarely open, at least in my district, in my realm of meetings and people that are around me. They were very good men and women. Don't misunderstand me. They were great leaders, in my view, and they had one passion, that was to help somebody. And but we didn't have those kinds of book workshops and study groups and tapes of Joe and Charlie, and elevated this book that just seems to be, I don't know, a mystery in my case. And slowly things have started. I like to think of it as AA's maturing to include the study of the big book and the practice of those principles through the eyes of Bill Wilson and the early founders who helped influence what is written. You know, one thing appeals to me about the big book is this: it's very descriptive. It's descriptive. It's not directed. There's no directives there. It's suggestions. And for an alcoholic like me, who absolutely put the hair on my head, I should say the back of my neck, not my head, to stand up, and that is somebody trying to tell me what to do. That doesn't work well with me. It never has. So the big book, in my view, was so inspired that it didn't give me a directive. It was an invitation. It was an invitation to look at something that I couldn't look for. It gave me language of my experience that I had no idea how to express. So I could start identifying with what it's like to be a real alcoholic. It gave me examples. This idea of, of the experiences that Wilson had about being an alcoholic, and the things that he mentioned about his mental states, his words that he used are almost like poetry. I can see myself saying, yeah, I understand what he's saying. I understand. That's me in this work. Not that everything fit 100%. It doesn't have to. But I can see by that leadership that I could fall into this category of what is now considered to be a real alcoholic. And I started examining and studying in the big book. I started using it as the basic text of my recovery. Page after page after chapter after chapter. And I just love, one of the things I do in my recovery is take these titles, these chapters, and see how those titles can work for me. But let me just give you an idea what I'm saying here. The title, There is a Solution. There is a solution. That title means to me, before I even get to the details of it, it means that no matter what I'm confronted with, what challenges me, what I'm conflicted about, what relationship I have that I was having trouble with, that there is a solution. The promise and the hope of that title of that chapter, there is a solution. What a beautiful and glorious title. Because I use it as a principle. I use it as a principle no matter what I'm up against. And in 50 years, I'll tell you, I've had challenges in sobriety. Absolutely. But I knew that there was a solution. I may not know what that solution is in the moment, but there is a solution. I was confident of that. I was no longer, in a sense, helpless. I was no longer hopeless. I had a recipe. So we call this a treasure map. And I think that's so great because I like the idea of it being a map. I like it. You know, just because I have a map of Chicago doesn't mean I'm in Chicago. You know, you run your fingers down certain streets on a map, convincing myself I'm in Chicago. No. See, there's only one way to experience Chicago, is being in Chicago. Now, the big book never claims to be the ultimate prize. It never claims that. It claims to be a basic text of our society. I need to separate that. Do I love the big book? Sure, I do. Do I identify with the writing? Absolutely. I read it most every day, even now. What happens in this experience is I begin to see I need to do something other than reading. It gives me a pathway, sure. It gives me a direction. It gives me a map. It gives me a recipe. However you want to describe it, it lays it out. And it lays it out so simply on another title of a chapter called How It Works. This is amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. You know, I just reminded, if I bought something like electronic item that I wouldn't know how to go about doing it, I may ask somebody, how does this work? How does it work? And they may give me a set of instructions about how to make it work. And in the title, it tells me how it works. No guessing, no opinion. It simply states how it works. So not only do I have language now that I can put into my experience of my disease, I begin to have language about what it means to recover. Because without language, I have no direction. I have no way of knowing. I need language. And that's the study of our big book. It gives me language in my recovery. And I want to share with you one thing that's changed my life. And I repeat this paragraph, and I want to share it with you. And I know you know it. It's not about me giving you something brand new here. I believe people on this meeting will say, yeah, I know that. I've read that many times. But for me, I had to go vertical, not to learn more, but to go deep into this one idea. And oddly enough, it's in the beginning of the book. It's not in the later part of the book. It's in the beginning. which tells me that I have access to something that I didn't really have to work for. And this is the great fact, friends. The great fact is just this, and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences, which have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do ourselves. That paragraph, if embraced, if it's digested, if it becomes part of my DNA, my way of filtering life, my life changes. It can't help but change. You know, I think about the great fact every day. And I have to remind myself, because my ego interferes with this, by the way, that I have this power that I can't describe or even limit through language, that is there in me, ready to give the kind of grace, the kind of love for me to move forward in my life, confident, so that I can have a whole and complete life, to be a full functioning human being, to thrive and flourish, if you like, or in our language, happy, joyous, and free. This is what this book represents to me. This is the roadmap. This is the treasure in which I've experienced by following how it works. It's in the practice of these ideas that one becomes recovered, not in the learning of these ideas. You see, this is nobody's fault. And when we grow up, when we went to school, what were we taught? We were taught to listen to a teacher and to comprehend what that teacher was saying through a textbook and through his teaching or her teaching, and to remember those things that were being taught. And then at some point we would have a test. And if we could regurgitate what was taught, we were a very good student. But as adults in recovery, that's not the kind of learning that's needed. The kind of learning that's needed, and the kind of I can give witness to, is what action am I going to take as a result of reading what I read? What action? Oh, it's nice to quote the big book. Oh, look at that person. He really knows the big book. He must be doing really well. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm doing well. Yep, feeling good, doing good. But underneath, I live a life of quiet desperation, because there is a fallacy that goes on. Just because I know something doesn't necessarily mean I'm doing something. And it's in the doing that I completely understand what is written. It is not in the knowing. I allow to digest into my heart. I ask for the grace of God to give me some direction. Help me implement what is being suggested. So when Polly was talking about going line by line, I said, yeah, that's what I do. Because I trust my Creator is working in ways that are providing me information. Let me just see if I can share this with you. I believe we have an intuitive ability to be connected and listen to the direction of God. I'm not saying I'm always right about this, by the way. It's confusing because the ego is interfering with this channel of the ages. But I practice it. I practice going internally to listen to a voice that doesn't speak. And what I mean by that is that when my curiosity or interest touches a word, I pay attention to that. It may pay attention to a phrase, something for me to identify with. I stop. I need to go deeper. There is a message here for me. And then I work out that message the best I can until I'm at least reconciled with the idea that I moved ahead. I write it out. It is part of my 10-step journal. I write it out. Why do I write it out? Because if you think about the way I think, at least, it's temporary. You know, I'm on from one thought to the next thought, to the next thought, to the next thought, without learning the experience of the beginning thought. That's the way my head works. I need to slow it down. How do I slow it down? I put a pen and paper together and I examine what I'm being taught. So it slows me down so I can reflect on this idea. What rouses my curiosity about this statement? What challenges me? What bothers me about this statement? See, these are spiritual gems in which we confront that sometimes we just overlook. And it's the very recipe I need to further my recovery. Oh, yeah. The big book is a roadmap. The big book is a roadmap that's going to show us how it works. And it doesn't stop there. We get a vision for you. We have hope in the vision of what's possible. You see, we don't live in our disease anymore. We remember our disease. Our emotions are no longer wrapped up in our disease. Why? Because we've dealt with it. But we use our past experience so we can help other people. And then we move forward. We had to move forward with a new vision, something brand new that's possible for ourselves. See, each and every one of us have been put on this earth for purpose, for meaning, for accomplishment. We need to rediscover that beyond our disease that interfered with this so terribly and drastically. So each of us reading the big book is amazed at some of the words that we overlooked before, and today they're important. That's funny, they haven't written the big book again. It's the same words. What's changed? I've changed. God in me is changing me to see something there that's brand new and fresh. And Paula spoke so beautifully about that experience. You see, this work is never done. I continue to engage in this work because I'm changing. The words haven't changed, but I'm changing. You know, I say to people, you know, I'm no authority on the big book. I'm no teacher of the big book. I don't believe myself to be. What I believe myself to be is this. In a way, I share with people how I read my big book today, and that's the Lectio Divina. It's a Latin phrase called sacred reading. First thing I do is I empty myself. I mentally and emotionally of all my preoccupations I have at that moment. And it's normal to have preoccupations. We go through our life every day, every moment, and we're impacted by circumstances and situations and so on. But not that they're bad or always negative. They're not. They're just there. And we're clouded up with, you know, what about work? What about family? What about this? What about exercising? What about this one? And we walk into a room full of preoccupation. So what I do and explain to people is first I have to empty this preoccupation. In other words, I have to let go in the language. I have to let go of what is distracting me from this very moment. I have to be all in and available. That's the first thing I do. The next thing I say to people is this: what is the author saying? What is it, before I even get into what it means to me, what is the author saying? Because I want to make sure that I'm following the directions of how it works before I start putting meaning to it. Then I ask myself this question: what is God saying to me? Now, It could be a dozen things, it could be one thing, or it could be nothing. But I'm paying attention. I ask God in my reading of this or sharing of it when I'm working with a group of people, what is God saying to you? Pay attention. Because what he's providing, as God is providing, is something that may need correction or something to expand on. As a result of the second question, my next question is, what is it I want to say to God about what I just read? What prayerful action do I want to say to God? What's some revelation that's happened, some epiphany maybe, something that's opened up for me, something that I may not have looked at before in my life, and all of a sudden I'm in this messy bog in the corner of my mind, seeing something for the first time, and I'm saying, my God, how long have you lived there? I never noticed you before. Deal with it, John, deal with it. And the last thing I do is I share with people is, what action am I going to take as a result of reading what I've read? What action? What do I mean by action? That means something observable, something that someone else outside of me can notice. That's the action. Not about reading. Reading more is not an action. Memorizing isn't an action. Those are internal things that stay in my head. The action I'm referring to is concrete, observable, and someone could notice that there's a difference in the way in which I'm approaching my life. That's the action I'm referring to. What I do, and I encourage others to do as a result of every conversation, every meeting, speaker or study, every time you read the big book, what is the one action? Not 10, don't do 10. One action that you can do. Now, one action seems so small and minute. And what happens in these meetings, in this discovery, working with God in my big book, in my life, is a ripple effect. So as it ripples out, it touches corners of my life that I've never even thought possible. What seems to be such a small and incidental thing I'm doing or practicing in the moment changes my life in many ways. Sometimes I don't even understand the ways in which it's changing me, and it's okay for me to be in that position. Now, friends, this brings me to this beautiful idea about prayer and meditation, which is part of our remedy. Yeah, well, it's a spiritual illness. Yeah, I feel poorly about myself. I feel distant from God, and I feel distant from you. And I live in quiet desperation. How can that be reconciled? How can it be reconciled? Well, you know what? The simple answer is this: surrendering. Surrendering to this power that is so fantastic, so great, so moving, so touching, so loving, that's going to change my heart and mind. See, it's not about me working on my defects of character anymore. You may recall I said, make sure you read what it says before you move on to what you think it means. Step 6 and 7 tells me he's going to look after my defects of character. And it's not me. I got to stay in my lane. It's not me, friends. What it is for me to allow and surrender to God to mold me in exactly the way he wants me to be molded. Not in my design, how John should show up in the world. No. See, that's vanity. That's self-centeredness, maybe for good reason, good purpose. But it's not necessarily what God wants. So when I'm in prayer and meditation, what I do is I become available and empty, willing to be molded, and I surrender to this power. Now, why should I surrender to the power? Because I admitted I was powerless. I admitted it the first step in the beginning. I said, I'm powerless. And then I went ahead and tried to control everything in my life. How I was going to show up, what I was going to look like, what kind of job am I going to have? How much money am I going to make? Well, how kind of house am I going to buy? I want a bigger car. You see, The exact opposite. Friends, we straddle in two worlds. We do. The physical world, where the world expects us to produce, to buy, to be responsible for families and pay our bills and do the right things with government. All good things, by the way. I'm not discounting them. In order to live, we have to eat. We have to provide for our families. Not bad. It's good. But it's those things that just don't work in the spiritual world. They take us away from the spiritual world. Because in the spiritual world, I need to surrender. I don't need to understand it in the spiritual world. I don't have to understand. See, God's going to reveal to me, as is stated in the big book, more. Who is? Was John going to discover it through his intellect and through his cognitive ability, his logic and his reason? Oh, I'd like to tell you that. But no, God is going to reveal. Now, I want you to get this because I think it's so significant. If I am powered by the grace of God, which is love, all my rest of my life will fall into place. I don't have to effortlessly try to do something, in a sense, because it's natural for me to be empathetic and caring and loving. Why? Because I'm reconciled with this power of love. I recognize it and I want to so embrace it that I want to share it with you. Today, friends, I don't feel separate from you. I'm in San Antonio, Texas. Everybody's around the world, and I can't be any more connected to each and every one of you, even though I may not know you, or I can't even see you on the screen, but I feel connected spiritually to you. I feel very connected to my God. I've experienced God in my meditation and prayer. My heart and mind has changed. It's changed because I followed some simple directions. And I'm going to use a word that everybody hates in this culture. I obeyed. I obeyed. I gave up the fight. No more rebelliousness, defiance, or even contempt. No, I'm looking to obey. Friends, thank you so much for your generous and kind listening. It's a pleasure to be with you. And that's all I want to say. God bless each of you.